Hello, and welcome to Distance Travel, the podcast where we signify the literal and metaphorical journeys of amazing individuals. And I'm sorry I haven't put out a lot of podcasts lately, but medical schools really kept me busy. I promise you, it is not an easy thing. And I also know that I haven't done a lot of podcasts, but it is one of the most amazing individuals I've ever talked to. The story, my God, the story is so relatable for Indian Americans, for Americans, and anyone who struggled in life, anyone who's had to overcome hardships. And this is for everyone going through hard times to prove that it is possible, it is achievable. And I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this. Dr. Sara G. Tariq. It is extremely hard to introduce someone who is loved and known by many, and who wears many hats, but I'll try. Dr. Tariq, professionally, is an internal medicine physician who's focused on women's health and eating disorders at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, and has been one since 2002. Additionally, among other things, she has served as the course director for Practice of Medicine 2, a course that teaches second-year medical students how to be doctors, essentially. The medical director for Simulation Center, a place where medical students can practice hands-on skills on mannequins before they go and see real patients and do those skills on them. The assistant dean for Undergraduate Clinical Education, and now serves as the associate dean for Student Affairs, all at UAMS. Dr. Tariq is decorated with an even longer list of awards, and to just list a few, she has gotten the most number of consecutive Golden Sash Awards selected by the senior class at the college, National Awards for Education Innovation by the American College of Physicians, one of the largest internal medicine physicians society in the United States of America. She has and continues to give talks, do research, and bring awareness on the topics of equity, education innovation, and inclusion at the university, and has been on the mayor of Little Rock's transition team to help make the city of Little Rock and Arkansas a better place to live in. My God, we should just name the college after you, Dr. Tariq. And if you can't tell, I'm clearly very excited to talk to you. I appreciate you for allowing me to do this, but I will digress because there's an even longer and heartwarming story. And I want to get back and let you talk about this. I really, once again, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you so much, Smith. I think thank you for that introduction. My head is getting bigger and bigger. I might not be able to fit outside the door.
Absolutely not.
That's very kind of you.
I want to start with this. So the first time I remember I had seen you in UAMS's College of Medicine's graduation and everything. But the first time you officially talked to us was during orientation. And I remember hearing your origin story. You had a whole presentation and you talked about it. And I emailed you that day. I was like, my God, I'd never felt seen as an Indian American in Arkansas as a role like this, especially in medicine. So can you briefly talk about that story?
Sure. So yeah, that story goes pretty way back, right? My dad came to the United States in the 1960s after John F. Kennedy opened up immigration, right? And that was the result of years and years and years of civil rights activism on the part of our Black community that allowed our country to open, right? And so many Indians and Pakistanis and South Asians were allowed to come into this country with green cards and on student visas.
Right.
And so my dad really didn't know much about America. He literally came to America with very little resources and ended up in Alabama. In Mississippi. God. Yeah, right? And this was right post Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws were still in place in 1967 in Mississippi, small town, right? And so he really was privy to the civil rights cause. And as soon as he stepped his foot in America, he realized that he was very different and he was treated very differently. He's also a dark South Indian, right? With this thick accent, right? And so he stands out. And so I think he really faced a lot. He was asked to enter from the colored, quote unquote, colored entrance.
Really?
Yes, he did. And so he was fearless. He questioned it right then and there. The police had to come out. The mayor had to come out. My dad is sort of this fearless guy who steps foot and just goes 100% in. And so that's sort of the legacy that my dad started of living in the South and facing whatever he faced with, sort of tenacity and courage. And that really set a huge example for us, me and my three sisters.
Right.
So, that was really important to me. And so I was born in Alabama. I was raised in Arkansas. I've been here since 1979. And there were so few brown people in Little Rock at the time. I remember my dad, being an Indian Muslim, opened up the phone book and started looking, like, as in the old days, the white pages, those things that don't exist anymore, those white pages, and looking for any Indian or Pakistani name or Bengali name to see if he could find somebody. And he cold called people. He's like, my name is Hashim Gori. I live in Little Rock. I heard you're also Indian. I heard you're also Muslim. Are you interested in meeting me? Like, literally, that's my dad.
Amazing.
That was my. And at that time, so we got settled, and there was an organization called the National Conference of Christians and Jews, NCCJ, which was a social justice organization that worked on inclusion. Right. And so my dad literally called them up and he said, I know that you're a conference of Christians and Jews, but do you take Muslims? And they're like, yeah, sure, absolutely. And so my dad became a member of that. So he really put himself forward, right? So he's sort of fearless that way. And so he faced a lot of discrimination. He faced a lot of challenges socially, but he kind of didn't let that stop him. And he quickly fell in love with Arkansas.
So your dad, did he come alone or did he come with your mother?
No, he came alone. He told my mom that he would come back to India in 2 years. And then, so he came in 1967 and started his graduate work. And then he called her in 1969.
Oh, okay. Right. So they were married. He came here to pursue his further education?
They had gotten married. He came here to pursue further education, fell in love with Alabama, fell in love with the South, and fell in love with America. He had been to Chicago. He had been to California, but he just fell in love with the South.
Wow. Similar story with my dad too, but I don't want to get into that. So then you came, so you were born here though, right? So
I was born here.
Right. So your mother came.
Yeah. And she sort of settled, had to deal with the idea that my dad loved this country. Right. And so they settled. And so I was born in Opelika, Alabama.
Oh my God. And then after that, your family moved, and you were the oldest of
I'm the oldest of four girls.
Oldest of four. And your whole family moved to Little Rock, Arkansas.
To Little Rock, Arkansas in 1979.
Okay.
So I was 8 years old then.
That's amazing. Okay. So how was that? That is such a crazy move. And obviously this is all you knew. So this is the normal for you.
Yeah.
But still, you can tell when you stand out. So how was that being in Little Rock, growing up in Little Rock like?
I have to be honest with you. It was hard. It sucked. Really. Right. It was very hard because, and I think you probably can relate to this as an American, who has a family with very strong Indian traditional ties, right? Who's also trying to assimilate in this country and in the South. It feels like you have 2 feet in 3 worlds.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Not just 2 worlds. No. It's 3 worlds or 4 worlds sometimes, right? So I had my mom who was still very traditional. She still wears the traditional shalwar kameez. She, you wouldn't think that she's been in this country for 50 years.
Right.
So my mom being very traditional, trying to maintain that traditional Indian, culture in the home.
Right.
So my parents never spoke to us in English. They only spoke in Hindi or Urdu.
Wow.
We, of course, on top of that, we had this Indian culture to hold on to. We had the Islamic faith to hold on to.
Right.
And I was the only Indian kid in the whole school. In elementary school.
My God, really?
There was I was the only brown girl in the whole school. And I remember kids coming up, I was in the 3rd grade, new to Little Rock. And I remember the kids saying, so are you mixed? Meaning, are you like half black and half white? And I'd be like, no, I'm Indian. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm Indian. I got Cherokee in me too.
That's not.
And I'm just like, ugh. And so I would just, not having the gumption, not having the wherewithal, I would just be quiet and just say, and just move on and let them believe that I was Native Indian. And then when I sometimes said, no, not that kind of Indian. I'm an Indian from India. And then I'd get this quizzical look and they would not have any idea that India is even a country and just move on. And so I was overlooked, right? Because they couldn't put me in the box that they wanted to put me in or knew to put me in. Right. And so they just kind of overlooked me.
So did it get better when you were in high school? Were there more Indians or was it still just the same? Because, a lot of kids probably from elementary went with you in high school.
Yeah. There were, in 1987.
You can count all the Indians in your school, can't you?
On one hand. So there were hardly any. And we didn't talk to each other.
See, that's the problem. See, yes. Why is that?
I don't know. I think we were scared of finding each other out, or we were scared. I don't know what it was.
Right.
And the other problem was I was the only girl. The other 4 were boys.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So there weren't a lot of, there's still by the 1980s, were still not a lot of South Asian kids in the high school.
Right.
So I was still very much alone in that way. There were a couple, but don't get me wrong. There were a couple, and I was friends with 1 or 2 of them, but not in that way. There wasn't a number enough where I felt seen or empowered or felt connected on that level that I see so many kids now. I mean, I went to Central High.
Exactly.
They had 2,000 kids at that time.
Right. And that's a big school.
It's a huge school.
Even today.
Yeah. And so they still have 2,000 kids. And now they have 100 brown kids, 150 brown kids. So the diversity there is amazing.
Yeah.
But back then, in terms of South Asians,
it wasn't like that. So let me ask you this then, because, you are one of 4 children. So when you go back home, yes, you have, your sisters and the family to relate, and especially having people who are born here, your sisters, you connect more because they are also going through the similar experiences. But I mean, your parents, I'm not blaming them, but they can hardly understand because you being born here, their formative years were there. So the experiences that you were having, you can, it's hard to articulate them if you haven't lived through them. And then you had your sister. So how was that a little bit helpful?
Oh my gosh. You really hit the nail right there. My sisters were my saving grace.
Right.
Right? Because even though each of us were about 4 years apart, we, at that point, they were all I had. Right? In terms of sort of living that experience.
Yes.
Now, the good news is by the time my sisters, came around, they each of them had their own sort of South Asian group of friends. And so their experience was very different from mine. But seeing them being bolder, seeing them being more sure of themselves, seeing them connect with others and being unapologetic really strengthened me.
That's amazing. That's exactly the same with my sisters.
Really?
I have a sister 9 years younger than me, and the things I can't even imagine doing or saying to my parents, she can. And I'm proud of her for doing so.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah.
But so as you were growing up, and this is especially true for older children in general, you're paving the path.
Oh, yeah.
They're probably the strictest on you, your parents.
Oh, my gosh.
So there are so many, forget curfews. You can't even go over to hang out with other friends.
That's exactly right. I only was allowed to have one friend, a girl, of course, who,
right.
And I wasn't allowed to spend the night at her house.
Nope.
She could spend the night at my house. So I was only allowed to have her as one friend. That was it. And it was, the constant, well, it's not that, we don't trust you, beta. We don't trust anybody else.
Right. The world is a bad place. Right.
And so I was taught to fear. I was taught to be scared of everything. Everyone's out to get you.
Right.
No, people, you're going to have to work 10 times harder to be even on equal footing because you're brown. You're not American.
No, never will be. You're the perpetual foreigner.
And what my parents didn't realize was that was wrong.
Yeah. No.
Right? In my mind, yes. Are there people in this country who still look at me and say, where are you from?
Right.
Yeah, that happens occasionally. But I'm so American.
Right.
But I think that's what my parents were scared of.
Yeah. No, and that's rightfully so, because that's everybody fears the unknown.
Sure.
Especially our parents in a new world.
Absolutely.
So,
but they figured it out real fast. My second, third, fourth sister, by the time my third sister came around, they were like, fine, do what you want to do. You going to prom? Okay, Jabberta, go.
What?
Go to prom. I'm like,
oh, that is crazy. You did not get to go. Did you get to
no
go?
Way. No way. And I didn't even have the guts to ask, right? Because we're the oldest.
Yeah, right.
I didn't have the guts to ask because I was like, I knew.
No.
So, they got to go to prom.
And like you said, your father, he was true to his faith, his Muslim faith.
Absolutely.
So was your mother.
Absolutely.
So did they help you learn your roots about your faith? And how was that? Because, even though you might practice it and your parents might practice it, you go outside and you don't find any unity or any mosque or anyone even talking or discussing the religious text or anything around that culture like Ramadan. They don't even know what that is.
No, they didn't. No, I really credit my parents with a lot of that because Dad came here again, like I said, in the 1970s, 80s, there was no mosque.
No.
And so, my dad is a fixer. So he's like, okay, there's no mosque. Well, I guess we're going to work to start one. And he led the creation of our first mosque here. It took years, but he gathered this interesting motley group of Muslims. There was only 3 Muslim families in Little Rock at the time. One was a Shiite Muslim, so different from us, but we didn't care. We're like, we don't care.
They
were Iranians who had migrated to India.
Oh, wow.
20, 30 years prior. So they spoke Hindi and Urdu. And so we're like, okay, yeah, you too. And then there was a Bangladeshi family, and uncle was an agnostic. And my dad's like, that's okay. You're Muslim now. Come on, just join us. And so we all had this, we figured our way around.
Right.
And actually, so we started first having Dad would lead these religious meetings in the basement of Second Presbyterian Church.
That's crazy.
Because they said, you guys, you don't have a place. We're going to give you a place for free until you build your mosque. We used them for probably 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
They were awesome. Every time I see Second Presbyterian Church, I put a prayer for them because they're just fantastic people.
That is really, truly amazing.
Isn't it? Just like the best of America, right?
I know.
The best.
Exactly. You will find good and bad everywhere. And that's been my experience too.
Absolutely.
So now moving on to your high school and transition from high school to undergrad. First of all, yes, your dad, he came here for his graduate studies and he's got his PhD. So obviously education and the importance of education must have been talked about it is in every Indian household.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did you know that between getting an engineering degree or getting anything in the STEM, right? Okay, you can do anything in STEM, go become a lawyer, go become a doctor.
That's it.
Yes, or engineer. That's it. So of those 3, how did you figure out that all right, I want to do somewhat related to STEM or biology in college?
Absolutely. So my dad first said, Beta, when I was in high school, Beta, why don't you think about medicine? And of course, being so fed up with hearing about doctors, I was like, no, I'm never going into medicine.
Right.
He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a psychologist. I want to get my master's and PhD in psychology, and I want to do therapy.
Wow.
And my dad's like, of course, that's another whole stigma there.
Depression's not real.
The depression's not real, right? I don't even know if there's a word in Hindi or Urdu for depression, right?
No, yeah.
So, it's not real. That's a pseudo, right? In the South Asian sort of unfortunate belief system. And I hope that's changing.
Yeah.
But Dad was very not hopeful about that field. But he sort of didn't push me in that way.
Really?
He really didn't push me. He said, okay, that's fine. Deklo, see what you want to do. And then in my senior year, I took AP Biology.
Okay. And
my AP Bio teacher, Anise Stedman, she's a legend in Little Rock, a legend teacher. And I fell in love with her. I fell in love with the class. Mm-hmm. And she herself had a breast mass. And she shared it with the class.
Right.
And she took us on this journey of what happened. Here's what is happening next. And she took us on this journey. And thank God it was not cancer.
Right.
But her story it just sucked me in.
Captivating.
Right? And how her self-doubt, her fears, her anxiety, her bravery, right? And at that time, women were still dying of breast cancer.
Right.
Unlike, of course it happens now, but much less. So her story really struck me. And then there was something else happening at that time. This was 1988, 89, which was the AIDS epidemic.
Right.
Blew up.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, being a bystander to a new disease that was affecting, at that point, a particular population of stigmatized individuals who were made to feel like they were pariahs. Mm-hmm. People were actually talking about taking all those people and putting them on an island.
Right.
And so being at the forefront of this socio-political, economic, infectious disease, sort of seeing all of this come together and seeing a group of people being stigmatized and discriminated against, it really affected me. And so one of the first classes I took at UA Little Rock was the course on HIV, brand new course on HIV.
Wow.
And it was a course where even the microbiologists from UAMS were coming to UA Little Rock to talk to us about the microbiology of AIDS and HIV. And
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
And you were
18. And
that's such a formidable age. Anything that impresses, good or bad, you will catch on to it.
I was like, I think I want to be a part of this. Because medicine stopped just being about the science. Right? It started to being about the human. Yeah. The humanity, the human experience, the pain, the sadness, the trials and tribulations and bravery. And that's when I was like, oh,
how can
this
you
is
not?
How can I not? This is what medicine is about. It's not just the science part of it, which I loved.
Yes.
But I was missing that human connection.
So let's backtrack a little bit, because you talked about going from high school to undergrad to UL, or University of Arkansas in Little Rock. we've talked about this before, but can you talk a bit about your decision for choosing a college? And I ask you this because I have a younger sister, and many, many young Indian American, especially women, can't really venture out or go too far for many reasons. One of them being that if you go out and go on a wrong path and away from parents, it's dangerous, it's a scary, big world. Once again, coming back to that big ideology that we see in our households, but that hurts our opportunities. These are capable people. You, my sister, people who are Indian American, no matter who it is, but especially Indian Americans in general, that hurts our opportunities. Because you are in Arkansas, and if you get an opportunity to go to Austin or New York or California, you're probably not going to be able to. And you've told me this. Can you tell me a little bit again about that decision?
Sure. So there was a lot happening in my senior year of high school. And so one of the things that happened was that my parents freaked out when they learned that boys were getting interested in me. And so they kind of freaked out. And of course, if you're 16, 17 and boys are interested in you, you kind of get interested too.
Right.
And so that ignited in them the reality of their fears for 18 years, right? It was going to happen because we came to this country.
And so that's not good.
No, man. So a couple things happened at that time. One is they got me married. So I had an semi-arranged marriage to a guy in India, who we knew, who was super cute, actually. And I literally, Smith, I don't even think I thought about it for more than 10 or 20 minutes because it was, I won't say brainwash because that sounds really negative, but it kind of was. Because you hear so many times, all you hear in the parties and aunties and mom and cousins, everyone's talking about arranged marriages. Exactly. I just wanted to be a good Muslim Indian girl. And so they said, you want to get married? We think this is a good match. And I was like, okay, if you think it's a good match. And he was cute and, he had finished his MBA. And so I thought, okay, this is probably the right thing to do. Cool. And so I missed my high school graduation to go to India and get married.
You're kidding me. Oh my God. Wow.
And at that same time, my parents were like, you're not going away to college.
Oh, come on.
You're not going to college. You have to stay in Little Rock. Good Muslim girls, good Indian girls stay here with our parents until you get married. Well, you leave this home and you go to your husband's home. Right. So
super traditional.
Right. So that was part of it. But the other part that I felt really good about, and this was my first taste of success on my own, which is I applied to the Donaghy Scholars Program at UA Little Rock. Yes. And it was such a cool program. And we got to travel and spend a summer abroad for free, amazing scholarship. And my dad also had 3 other kids to take care of, right?
Right. That's that Indian coming in. The economics.
Right. I don't want to put my dad under too much stress. So I chose to go to UA Little Rock. I got into the Donaghy Scholars Program. I absolutely was super excited about that program. And I loved it. I loved being part of the Donaghy program.
So how'd you get your parents to let you go? Because it was a full ride? Was that a big part?
Yes. And of course it was Little Rock, right? It was Little Rock. So it was home.
Oh, it's right here. Yeah.
It's right here. It's at UA Little Rock. It's the Donaghy program. And yes, I could travel abroad for a summer and they would allow that. They would be okay with that.
Awesome.
So that's really how that came about. So it was a compromise. I felt like at least I had won something because I had done something on my own, applied to this prestigious program, got a full ride on my own, and I was going to get to travel. Right. So my parents were happy because they're like, oh, she's getting married. Right. So it was
a win-win.
It was a win-win.
So then while you were at ULR for 4 years, you got your degree in
biology and psychology. Yeah.
Whoa! Wow! Really? Psychology as well?
Because I remember I was like holding on to that psychology. Like I loved psychology, so I thought maybe I'll do psychiatry. I don't know.
Bridging together the humanism and medicine. Mm-hmm. So as you did that, and I'm assuming you commuted from home to ULR. Mm-hmm. So
which is home is here, right? So it was fine.
And you're going through this now as you get. I don't know how it was back in like 1980s, but when you were going through, as you finished or were getting near to the completion of your bachelor's degree, how was the process of wanting to go to medical school, applying to medical school, preparing for the entrance exam, the MCAT, getting in and then going?
Yeah. So I wish I could tell you that I was smart and strategic about all those steps. I really wasn't. And I think it's because there was no other people in medicine in our community at the time. Now, the Desi community is...
Right.
But back then, there really weren't a lot. And so I sort of probably could have gotten better guidance. And I didn't know where to reach out to because again, my parents were they were so insular that they were really within their South Asian community. We didn't have friends. If you weren't Indian or Muslim,
you're not.
We really didn't socialize with those kind of people, right? So I kind of figured it out through ULR on my own.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I'm trying to navigate a marriage.
Right.
And my husband's coming here and trying to assimilate here. He does not like being here.
Okay.
He does not like the fact that I'm independent. I'm growing my independence and I'm going to Europe by myself and I'm learning and have my own set of friends, right? And then, so I studied for the MCAT for 1 week.
That is absolutely crazy. And you got in.
Yeah, Dr. my score was not good though. My score was really low.
You freaking got in though. Oh my God.
So
that's
my score
amazing.
was not spectacular. So it was like not why I was crazy. I don't know what I was thinking. I studied 10 hours a day for 7 days. That was not the smartest move on my part. And again, goes back to the fact that I didn't have a lot of guidance. My parents couldn't afford a course.
Right.
They weren't good. We didn't have money for Kaplan, even though there was Kaplan at that time. We didn't afford. So I was like, well, if it's not Kaplan, I just think I'm just going to try this.
Right.
And it was not the best score ever, but I had other things. My college grades were really good. I did a lot of neat things in college, and I think that helped me. I'm also a good interviewer. I think that helped me.
Right.
And so I got into medical school. And the day I got into medical school, my husband informed me that I wasn't going.
What? The day you got it? Mm-hmm. It wasn't even like, let's talk about this.
No. He informed me that I wasn't going because I think he honestly didn't think I could get into medical school. He thought, everybody says it, right? Like, all the Desi kids, all the South Asian kids say they're going to go into medicine, but do they all really go?
Right.
So I got into medical school and he said I wasn't going to go. And so that sort of started the downfall of the understanding that I thought we had in our marriage.
Right.
And it ended with me taking a year off. I postponed my seat, deferred my seat for a year, went to Chicago to be with his family, to live with him, and worked at Sam's for 10 months.
No.
Yeah, I worked at Sam's. And a week before orientation was going to start, I told him, I spent the whole year trying to convince him and talk to him, and we're sort of going back and forth and trying to connect and keep the, marriage alive. And at the end, he was like, no, that's not gonna work. And so that morning he went to work and I packed my shit, and as fast as I could, I put everything in my Honda Civic and I left him. I never saw him again. Started medical school the next week.
That is so badass. Honestly, it takes courage. It takes guts. Especially if now, maybe, and it's still hard. But back then, you don't see no one around you doing this. You were such an outlaw, and being around in a community, I'm talking about the greater American population, it's hard to fit in, it's hard to be accepted. So then you want the affirmation, you want the acceptance of the community that you're a part of. And if that's oppressing you, it's like, no, you know what? I'll take it because at least they love me. But then you didn't do that. That is wild. That is also so many people now study you, look at you and all right, I can do it too. And that is just, I don't even know how. And also when you say I didn't have guidance or my move for the MCAT was not so smart. And that's really unique because in retrospect, everything's oh yeah, I mean, totally. Come on. I saw that. So that's
yeah. That made some interesting choices, but it was the strength. Honestly, it was the strength of my grandfather, who always, despite being in India and being very traditional, was no, you leave him. You want to be a doctor, then you don't let anything or anyone stand in your way. So my grandfather, my mom's father, always pushed me, and of course my dad, the ultimate badass, right? The ultimate. My dad's not scared of nothing.
Dang.
He's he's a 5'7" South Indian and not scared of anybody. So
he supported you in the end.
Oh yeah. He supported me from day one. He was I called my dad that morning and I said, that's what I'm going to do. He's get out, get your bags. Let's go. Come on home.
Okay.
So I always had my family supporting me. My mom had a little bit of a harder time being very traditional, being a woman. Right. No one else in my family had ever divorced. Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, no one does that. In India, that's oh, no, you don't divorce. Right, yeah.
Especially not over that.
It's changing now.
Yeah,
but
it's changing now.
For the better.
For the better, thank God. Yeah.
So how was that going to medical school, starting medical school? And that's difficult, man. No one, once again, coming back, depression not real. Going through anything is not real. Come on, you're strong. You're Indian American. You're a daughter of an immigrant. Yeah. How was medical school like?
Medical school was definitely the hardest and most amazing thing I've ever done.
That is-
My first grade, I think I told you this before, my first grade in medical school was an F. And what I didn't tell us was that I had gotten that F because the day before, somebody had come to my front door and given me divorce papers.
I see.
Right. So that was my first grade was an F. Obviously, a huge part of that was I didn't know how to study.
Right.
The second part of that was I was trying to deal with that shame that comes part and parcel with family and social, right, challenges like this, right?
Yes.
So I'm sort of trying to deal with that and balance all that, dealing with my mom and my parents being upset about the whole thing and feeling bad,
right?
That they pushed this marriage on me that failed, dealing with my own failure,
yes,
right? And then plus going, I gotta pass medical school. I gave up everything for this.
Right.
I can't mess this up.
Yeah, so much writing on that.
Right?
So much is writing on
So I picked myself up. I relearned, I fixed the way I was studying. I clearly was not studying efficiently. I didn't know how to study. And I met with then the doctor, the person who was Dr. Thapa for you guys.
Really?
I met with student wellness, and I was like,
there was student wellness back in that day?
Yes, Dr. Linda Worley was the Dr. Thapa.
She's still around.
She's still around. She's our associate dean of Northwest Arkansas.
Wow.
So she was around. I spoke to her. I met with her, and I sat in her office, and I shared everything. And at the end of it, she basically said, "You're clearly processing all of this in real time.
Right.
You've got a plan. I think you're going to be okay."
Do you believe that your ability to take initiative, because that's a big initiative that you took, even with, your marriage, that's also a big initiative that you took, applying to a full ride at UALR, trying to game the system. Once again, that initiative that you took. Do you believe that you learned that maybe subconsciously looking at your father and what he did?
I gave him a lot of credit. Seeing him, my mom was very traditional. She worked for a couple of years to support my dad for his graduate work. And then she was the traditional stay-at-home mom and stay-at-home wife.
Right.
But yeah, I learned a lot from my dad. My dad constantly bucked this. He was not afraid. And did it with a smile.
Right.
Always with a smile. So we learned that from him for sure.
That's really good. So what did you love the most about your preclinical years and clinical years? Because you talked about, we had this conversation in your office about my God, Dr. Tariq, I'm going to fail human anatomy. This is so hard. I'm studying from 7 to 7. This is not working out. And then you told me the story about what you came in with and how you changed. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Sure. So there were many things that happened at that time, right? One was definitely that I had always been successful in high school and undergrad.
Right.
And so I thought that same MO would work here.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly learned from my first grade, first score on my first exam that was not going to work. And so I had to do a couple of things. I changed my MO. I started to look at different ways of studying. I used index cards. I started talking to myself. I started, doing different things. My biggest support really was a group of friends that I found in med school.
Really?
Yeah. Huge support in my gross anatomy group and my friends who studied on the 8th floor of Ed 2 with me until midnight every night. They, that was my huge social support at that time.
You put in the hours.
We put in the hours till midnight every day. But it was my friend. If I was alone, I don't think I could have done that. I don't think I could have sat up in Ed 2 studying until midnight by myself. It was a group of us, right?
Right.
Who studied, but also had fun and who had dinner together and who built each other up. And that really was my source of strength.
So now, at this day and age, we still have I and 4 other Indian American men in our class. 0 Indian American women in our class.
I don't even think I realized that.
Yeah. Anywho, not to get into that. We'll get.
Yeah.
But how was your friend group like? Did you see yourself in your classmates as a representative? What do you see? Not seeing, but you know what I'm saying? You can look in the room and say, all right, here we go. First in the room. You know what I'm saying? You can guess the questions that they will come. Are you Indian? Do you speak Indian? Do you eat curry? You know what I'm saying? So are you the feather or the dart?
Exactly. There was some of that in medical school.
Right.
The people who were my friends were either worldly in that way, they were from Arkansas, but they had done amazing things in the world and seen the world. So I wasn't that represented. I wasn't an anomaly to them, right? They knew, everyone knew I was Indian. They figured it out quickly. They realized when I told them I was Muslim, they weren't like, oh, what's that?
Right.
So my group of friends, were sort of those people who connected with me immediately.
Okay.
But those questions that you ask, are you the feather or the dot? Where are you from? Do you speak Indian? Oh, I love curry. Do you know that other Patel? Do you know Patel?
Oh my God. And I am a Patel.
That especially sucks for you.
I know.
And so my answer is always, Patel is like Smith.
Yeah.
Silence.
Yeah.
Patel is like Jones. I've always gotten that. It gets better.
Right.
Thanks to, again, there's this growing number of South Asians in the South, right? In Arkansas. And what I love about your generation is that you're more vocal about it. You share these stories. We were so new and we were so insecure and unsure of ourselves with who we were. Right. I don't see that with you guys. You guys are fearless.
But we stand on your shoulders.
I'll give myself some credit for that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So did you have any Indian Americans in your class or no? Or was it once again like all boys and like you were that one Indian girl?
Yeah, there were no Indian girls. There were Indians in the class after me.
I see.
But there was none in my class.
Okay. All right.
There was none in my class. There was one Indian guy, but that was it.
That's it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, come on.
It was real. I'm telling you, 1994.
Right. Okay. So you found a friend group, you studied with them, you got through the first and second years. And I must say, I've had a similar experience as well, because I found friends, American friends, white, black, Hispanic, and more, that have opened their hearts and shown me the way and have supported me and have helped me with classes. I remember failing a test and TC, one of my friends here, gave me a call saying, hey man, it's not the end of the world. We got this. We will make it out. I remember Harrison telling me that, look, dude, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. We will make it out. And as long as we'll make it out, we will be doctors. Reminders like these are rare, and these true people who have been there are the reason I'm here with you. You know, a lot of people have helped me within the class, so it's not all bad. Mark, every single test, he would call me, be like, hey man, how are you doing? How are we doing? We passed? That's great. Wonderful. Catherine, one of my other friends, she would also just check in on me, and we would just help each other out with resources or new things that we would find, and that has been such a lifesaver. Anyhow, did you still have the step then? Like the lesson things in?
Oh yeah, we still had step 1.
So you took that.
I took that, passed it.
And was it still the same way? Like, all right, now we don't have the score, but like based on that score, even before you step a foot on the wards, you can know, all right, these are my things that I can probably apply to and get into. Anything else I apply to, I probably won't. So, did you know that?
That was not the case back then.
Oh, it was not?
No. So because it has gotten so competitive now, your generation of medical students is facing that challenge. In the past 5 or 10 years, it's been that way.
Right.
But when I was in medical school, with my step score, which was not spectacular by any means.
Oh, you are too humble.
No, seriously. I figured I can't get into dermatology.
Okay.
Everything else, the world was my oyster.
Oh, really?
So people could get into ortho. I made a 211 on step 1. You could get into ortho. You could be a urologist. You could do OBGYN. And almost anything but derm you could do.
Okay. So you survived your first and second year, yes. And we had this talk. So you talked about and everybody does mostly in medicine. They have this origin story. For me, it was neurology and kind of got crushed this last cycle with the brain and behavior course. But you had that. What was that for you? And then how did you figure what you're going to do with the help of clinical years?
Oh, so you mean in my third year?
Yes.
So you mean about my internal medicine story? Oh, gosh. Yeah. So I started medical school knowing that I was going to be an OBGYN, right? I knew it. I loved everything about women's health. Even in the first 2 years, anytime anyone talked about dysfunction and abnormal uterine bleeding or pregnancy or the physiology of pregnancy or my eyes, right? I would just love it. I would just eat it up.
Right.
So I knew. So that interest in women's health and OBGYN continued to strengthen in my first 2 years. And then my first rotation was at the VA on internal medicine.
Right.
And I took care of a veteran who was 62 years old.
Right.
And he had lymph nodes in his groin the size of golf balls. And I took care of him. And he was from a small town in Arkansas that I had never even heard of. And we just took to each other. And I took care of him. That back in those days, we were doing bone marrow biopsies as students at the bedside.
No, oh my God.
So I got to do a bone marrow biopsy. My first resident was this awesome guy. He was from Egypt. Phenomenal teacher. His name was Ani Farajala. I still remember him so fondly. He let me do everything. And I just took it all in. And I thought, and this was all men, right? Here I am. I want to do women's health.
Right.
I'm at the VA.
Right.
Taking care of, at that time, there were only men at the VA, pretty much.
Right.
I was like, no, I can't. Like, really? How am I going to do this?
Right.
Internal medicine?
Right.
But I fell in love with it. And then I thought, no. I'm going to keep my mind open and wait till OBGYN.
Okay, so OBGYN comes around.
And OBGYN comes around, and my first day, I have to deliver a baby. And back then, there was like 6 women in a room.
Right.
Just a curtain in between, right? Mm-hmm. And so this woman is in labor, and I'm thinking, okay, this is cool. And then all of a sudden, projectile vomiting from across the room, and I duck literally and avoid getting emesis in my hair. And
fancy, emesis,
super fancy,
vomiting.
And at that point, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And then we had to be in the OR for 7 or 8 hours at a time. And it was cold and I would have to stand for hours. And I was just like, I don't think this is for me. And I kept going back to internal medicine.
Was it a hard choice? Like, I have worked and invested mentally so much that I'm going to do OBGYN. I had the resources and the ability to go into it. And then now here comes something that I didn't even expect.
Yeah. I felt that way between medicine and OBGYN. I was really scared. I was like, I wonder what this is going to be like. Right. But the farther away I got from internal medicine, the more I realized that I loved everything about it. Even when I was on surgery, I did great in the ICU, the critical care unit, the ICU, because I was taking care of surgical patients, but it was medical, right? I was worrying about lines and intubation and, sorts of sepsis, and I just loved it. Right. So I knew by the time OBGYN was over, I knew that the OR was not in my future.
Okay.
Cutting on people was not in my future. And so I went to internal medicine.
So that's 3rd year. What did you do your 4th year? Because we have this big change coming in your story from Arkansas. So what did you do? How did you stand out? What did you do 4th year? Because you did something.
4th year was, for me, was really honing in on my internal medicine love. So I did all kinds of crazy things. I mean, so I remember this is now the time when HIV medications are coming out.
Yes.
But people are still not living long. It's not a chronic disease yet. Right. People are they're living longer, but it's still...
They're working on it.
Yeah. So we took care of tons of HIV patients. And I think that's what sort of tapped into my understanding of the social determinants of health and what happens in people's lives that gets them to where they are, how people deal with illness. So I sort of I did infectious disease and really learned a lot about that. I went to Fort Smith and did cardiology in Fort Smith because I knew that there would be no residents. It would just be me and the cardiologist. So I got to do everything.
Gaming the system again.
Man, I just knew. I wanted to be first.
Right.
And then I did the ICU because I was scared to death of lines and tubes and machines. And so I said, I've got to overcome this fear before I have an MD behind my name.
Right.
So I did the ICU, and it was an amazing, at the same time, exhilarating, also heart-wrenching experience. It's where we really got to see the human side of medicine, believe it or not, in the ICU. It's where I saw my first patients die. It's where I saw, patients who I took care of, right? For the first time. Right. So that was hard too, but I really grew a lot from it. I still remember my residents. I remember what they look like. I remember some of my patients. Like, I can't forget those things, Yeah. It was tough month, but I grew immensely as a result of it.
So, as you're talking about this, and once again, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm clearly very excited to talk about this. And I've already talked about almost all of these things with you. But now, it's maybe more than when you were going through. But there's a lot of economic or the analytical or the financial, like, all right, let's look at what specialties make more than $300,000, work less than 40 hours a week, and then let's go into that, right? And if people have the resources or the ability or their capacity to go into it, most likely they will.
Yeah.
Not all, but at least 1st and 2nd year, that's the overwhelming talk. And for you had it. Like you were saying, everything was almost open. Yes, you realized maybe not the OR, right? But after internal, you could have done a lot of other things. But at least in 4th year, going into your decision making, did you think about that, or how did you struggle with that?
No, I knew pretty quickly I wanted to do primary care. And the reason why was, again, I don't remember every medicine I've given to a patient. I don't remember every procedure that I've done. But what I remembered were the human stories, right?
Right.
I remember when I was working in the ICU, there was an 18-year-old girl who was adopted, and she had pulmonary hypertension that had been undiagnosed. Records were lost because she was adopted, right?
Oh, right.
And I remember her turning blue. She was blue in the ICU. She came blue, and we were trying to get her on the transplant. Transplants were not as easy. It was hard to get on the transplant list in those days. Right. You could, we were working on it, right? It takes days. You can't just, get it quickly. And Little Rock, UAMS was not a lung transplant place. We were trying to get her to St. Louis. And I remember her long hair down to her waist, and the nurses would come in every day and comb it, and how her family sort of had rejected her. They rejected her because she was dating a black guy.
Oh, come on.
They rejected her. And so she never had family come. But we took care of her every day. We comb her hair, we talked to her, and we joke with her. And then one day she coded, and we coded her for an hour and a half, and she died.
For people who don't know, can you define what coded is?
Sure, absolutely. Her heart stopped from the chronic strain of the low oxygen, from the high blood pressures in her lungs, from the lung pressures, and her heart stopped. And we tried to save her through, CPR and all of those things, and she passed. And it was heartbreaking. And it was those stories. And I remembered her resilience. She never cried. She just kind of took it and faced whatever she was going to face that day in the ICU, My God. And so for me, I became more interested around the social aspects, around those challenges that people bring to the clinic, right? She brought with her to the ICU more than just pulmonary hypertension. Right? She had all of this backstory that affected her. And I've changed some details so you won't be able to track. Right?
Yeah. No,
so the backstory. And so she brought that with her. And so that is what I still hold on to 25 years later. So to me, I knew that if I could prevent illness, if I could counsel people and help them before they got sick and ended up in the ICU, then that was a huge win for medicine. Yeah. So that's why I chose primary care. And then, of course, I still couldn't let go of women's health, right? So I became very interested. I had always been interested in sort of the changes that happens in menopause. And remember, those days, no one said the word hot flash.
Really?
It was taboo. It was inappropriate to say the word hot flash. So people didn't talk about it on TV. The first person ever to talk about hot flashes on TV in menopause was Oprah. And that was on the news. It was a big deal. Oh my God, Oprah actually talked about this topic. I know you're looking at me incredulously because it's crazy in 2022 to think that people didn't talk about this publicly. No, they never did.
Now it's a common topic.
Now it's like everybody talks about it. But back then it was a big deal. And so I was very interested in sort of the menopausal changes and osteoporosis and sort of those changes that are unique that happen to women, that happened to my grandmother in India. And she didn't know what to do except wear a diaper, right?
Right.
She didn't address it with her doctor because you don't address these issues with your doctor.
No, I know.
Right?
I know. Yes.
Right?
Sorry, continue.
Absolutely. So it's like these changes that women experience that I saw my aunts and grandmothers experience in India that I thought, and I guess that's always why I was interested in women's health, because I wanted to empower my women patients with knowledge and access to medicines and understanding that they otherwise felt that they couldn't address.
That's something, Dr. Tariq. So as you decided, all right, I'm doing internal medicine. All right, I'm doing primary care. Then comes end of fourth year and you start applying, or fall of fourth year. I don't know what you did, but you did something good because you ended up at Brown, an Ivy League up in Rhode Island for your internal medicine residency. And not just that, you ended up there. You ended up staying an extra year as a chief resident too. Oh my God, what the heck? How did you land that? That is an amazing feat.
Thank you. It was. Remember, back then, the step score was not the end-all be-all, right? So that was a huge thing. Brown has an interesting philosophy. They don't have a hyper-focus on step scores. They look at you as a person. Right. They look at you as...
But they all say that. Don't they screen, nowadays?
Yes.
All right, it's holistic, but you pass that screener, then we'll look at you.
Yeah, I don't think they had screeners then, to be honest with you. Okay. I really don't. So by this point... I was dating a guy on the internet when it was not cool to date anybody on the internet. How else was I going to meet a nice Muslim guy? I wasn't going to meet anybody in Arkansas.
Yeah, getting that, yes.
So I was talking to a guy who was in South Dakota. He was from Pakistan, and he had come here for college. So he's in South Dakota, and he had just finished his degree and had gotten a job in Boston.
Oh, wow.
So he was moving to Boston.
So you're gaming it again?
I was like, I gotta go to
Tariq.
Boston. I was like, how am I going to get to Boston?
Apply to Harvard.
Right. And I applied, and Harvard was like, thank you so much for applying, but no thank you. You do not have an interview. So I was like, okay, fine. So I applied to Mass General, BU, Brown, WashU, because I had always loved WashU, and UAMS.
Okay.
So I have 5 programs. That's all I applied to.
Wow.
Because I either want to be in
that is not how that works.
A different world, right? Totally different. So which is why it pains me to see the system as it is these days. Because I feel like it's really
gone backwards.
Broken for you.
Yes.
Guys. It's really dysfunctional for you guys, and I feel badly. And we know if it's any comfort on the national level, we are talking about it. I don't know. We're not fully yet empowered to make those changes, but we'll get there. It will get there. So I applied to, like I said, Mass General, very polite rejection letter. I interviewed at BU, Brown, WashU, and UMS. And I really fell in love with Brown. They were, first of all, they're a bunch of good, kind-hearted
white people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So let me tell you about the people who I interviewed with. One was a guy who was really cool, who I'm still in contact with. He had a ponytail and he wore Birkenstocks to the interview.
Oh, wow.
Like, these are my people. And the other person who interviewed me was, again, this was 1998, right? 798. Yeah. And, she basically shared in their interview that she was in the LGBT community. And so I thought, these are such cool people.
Right.
And so I thought, these are my people, man. These are like kind-hearted, compassionate people who have also been on the outside.
A bunch of misfits can only make it fit. Yeah.
And that's why I think I connected with them, because they've all felt that same sort of pain or being left out, of not being seen.
Right.
And so I was like, I like people. And so I, of course, loved UAMS, but UAMS didn't have a primary care focused residency, and Brown did. Brown was one of the top residencies in the country that started a primary care track.
Oh,
so
wow.
in the residency, you still complete a regular internal medicine residency, but the focus is on primary care training.
Right.
So I still did the ICU and the CCU and all of those things, but focus on primary care. And so I just fell in love with it.
Okay.
And it was 30 minutes. So I was like, all right, I told my husband, Tariq, I was like, Oh,
you married him?
I married him a week before match.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I had no idea where I was going. I would have been in Arkansas, St. Louis, or Rhode Island.
Right.
Or the Boston, Rhode Island area. And so, luckily I matched in Brown. And so he was like, yeah, I'm moving. And so he commuted an hour. I commuted 20 minutes. So we lived sort of in the middle, and we made it work for 4 years.
Because dating is hard, especially as an Indian American Muslim woman, not just you now, even today, for Indian Americans to date other Indian Americans, because it's easier. The context you don't have to explain. It really is. And like, also there's like the added pressure on top of the pressure that you have from medical school and parents goes away.
Yeah.
So like, how was online? Like, that's just difficult.
It was so hard. So we started online, and then we met a couple of times.
You met in person?
Yes, we met in person a couple of times. He met my parents.
Okay.
So I had told my parents. By this point, my parents were like, we give up. We're not going to get you married again. You do what you want to do.
Right.
We realized that was a mistake.
Right.
And so they let me, make that decision. I was no way interested in marriage at that point. I was like, let me just get through med school.
Right.
And so, we found each other on an internet relay chat back then.
Nice.
Through my cousin, who's like, Sara G, you got to get on this and check this out. So I did, and I met this really neat, very broad-minded, progressive thinking guy.
That is amazing.
Who's
Indian guy.
Pakistani guy.
Pakistani guy,
yes.
Pakistani guy.
Close enough. And he came from a family where his aunts were trailblazers and physicians and deans and amazing people.
Oh my God.
So I thought, okay. This is good. We jived.
You found your power couple.
We clicked. And he's just a humble, sweet guy. And so my parents, they were like, fine, he's Muslim, he's South Asian.
That's all they want.
He's not Indian, he's Pakistani, but we'll take it. It's fine.
Muslim guy.
Pakistani, first Pakistani in our family.
Oh, wow. You really were the trailblazer. So you married before match, you go to Rhode Island. Why did you come back? How was that experience?
I know.
How was that experience? How was it like living there? And then why did you come back?
Oh my God, I loved being in Rhode Island. For someone who was born and raised in the South,
yes,
Rhode Island was a significant culture change,
yes,
right? But I loved it. I loved the Rhode Island was that small town feel, but still very progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Desis, lots of South Asian, huge Muslim community. Like, I took Bharatanatyam classes for the first time in residency. Yeah, man, it was awesome. I met my best friend ever, Nisha, whose husband Parag was in residency with me. It was just this fantastic 4 years. I gave birth to my daughter Sahar.
Oh my God.
And because when I left Arkansas, I was like, peace out. I'm out.
Yes.
I'm gone.
Yes.
I'm gone. Going to live this great adventure. And I did.
Going to live this great adventure.
And then one thing pulled me back. It was my family. My parents were in Arkansas.
You had the capacity at that time to bring your family there.
I did.
And support them. Like, you could have done that.
I could have done
and
that.
You have this great Indian Desi population. Come on. Like, how hard was that to give it up? Why did you come back?
Because remember, this is my dad. He's a strong man, right?
Right.
And he never said come back. He didn't. But for me, my priorities changed because in my third year of residency, towards the end, I had my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was like, oh, this is why family is really important. Because I didn't have that foundation, right? I had a community. They were all working. There wasn't a community and when you're in residency, everybody's busy and you're so busy that you don't have the time to put roots down in the community. No, and I had a great community of South Asians and Desi friends and Muslim friends, but not enough that it wasn't home fully, right? Arkansas was home. And so I thought, you know what? Let's just come down. My mom will help with Sahar, with my daughter. And
was this a temporary move or let's just come down and let's wait till our daughter grows up and then we'll go back?
I don't know if I thought that much in advance, to be honest with you. I really didn't.
Okay.
What I realized though, that when I was in residency, I missed, and I knew this. I don't have any illusions about this, grand illusions about this, which is I didn't see my child take her first step. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear her say her first word, right? Her Gujarati babysitter did.
You had a Gujarati babysitter?
Yes, of course I did.
Dude.
I mean,
I love the
it's Boston, man. Me too, absolutely. And so I missed all those things. And I signed up for that. I knew that. I wasn't like, I didn't have these, romantic ideas about being a mom. I knew that I would miss those things.
Right.
But at some point I was like, you know what? If I'm not there to love my child, my mom should be there to love my child, or somebody should really love, right? So that's why I came back to Arkansas. And Bob Hopkins, who was my mentor as a medical student, obviously was still here. I emailed him. I was like, Dr. Hopkins, I'm interested in a job in Little Rock. And the answer was, come right now. Let's interview you.
No kidding.
So it was home. So I think I needed that, right? It was like this sense of coming back home. The sense of the security of knowing people who knew me as a medical student and who believed in me. Although Rhode Island was awesome. Rhode Island Hospital, Brown University, they were fantastic. Right. But my parents, and also if you remember, when I was a chief resident, that's when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And I remember.
Life changed.
Oh, yeah.
A lot happened, especially for us. People who looked like us.
It changed overnight. That same night in Providence, they arrested a Sikh man on a train.
Right.
Because they thought he was Muslim and a terrorist because he was wearing a turban and he had a beard. Right. And at that moment, I realized that, I don't think I realized it consciously, but somewhere in my midbrain, it wasn't even in the unconscious.
Midbrain, come on, let's not talk about the brainstem. I'm kidding.
Like I realized that I would need to be doing interfaith work. Mm-hmm. And I felt like the biggest need was back home in Arkansas.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Right?
Yeah.
So it just drew me back. And I think I needed the stability that my dad had to offer. And remember, at this time, right after 9/11, all this is happening. I'm in residency. I'm raising Sahar. Tariq is working full time. I'm working full time.
9/11 happened.
9/11 happens. My dad's down here. The FBI comes to our home. The FBI comes to his work.
No.
So he's being scrutinized just because he's a Muslim.
Right.
Right? And he started the mosque.
That's just wrong.
And so it was a scary time.
Yeah.
And I felt, you know what? I think I need to be home.
Right.
Dad's alone. Two of my sisters had gone to college. The fourth one was in college, I think, by that point. So it was just, I felt like my parents were alone here. Mm-hmm. Dad was still working. He wasn't going to quit his job. Right. So I was like, I need to be home.
Right. And you were the only one, at least in your family, who had the ability to I can come.
Yeah.
You know.
I was at a stage where I could come.
Yeah.
And I think my husband realized that we needed a little bit of support for our daughter.
Right.
So it was like a mutual thing. I needed my parents, and I felt like my dad needed me. We needed my parents to help with Sahar.
Right.
So I think it just worked out really well.
And I want to bring up this one interview that I heard. I talked about this before we started, but a Christian, a rabbi, and a Muslim talks, and you have done that. That was a recent interview, but you have done those types of work, and it's just difficult, Dr. Tariq, because I have learned that when you are the only one after especially an event like 9/11 talking about Muslim faith, when there's so much conjecture, so much, and it's all about interpretation too.
Of course.
So all of that, you have to be so well versed in your religion, your faith, and then present it in a way that you don't get pushback. Come on, that is just too much to ask for on top of being a physician. How did you do that?
It was a lot. It was the roughest part. It was a lot because all of a sudden I felt this weird, part of me felt like, wait a minute, I'm not responsible for these terrorists.
Right.
They're not me.
Right.
I don't represent them, but yet I constantly
felt the
put
need
in
to
that,
explain.
right?
Yeah.
I constantly felt the need to explain.
Right.
I constantly felt like, okay, if I'm not going to educate people or at least put myself out there, who's going to do that?
Right. It's like you're being attacked, and then someone is like, "Oh, dude, I wanna learn. I wanna be cultured. I wanna learn more about your religion." So it's like, "All right, let me first stop this fire, and then you know what I'm saying? Like you can't do both at once, but you did both at once, and it's just exhausting."
No choice. It is exhausting. It was absolutely exhausting. It was.
You are a strong woman, Dr. Tariq. I truly, I'm not even joking.
Thanks, man.
So when you came back. And we are nearing to the end. I don't want to take too much of your time, but these are some of the very few questions that I want to ask because it's still so much. Your story is so amazing. It's so captivating. So when you came back, you took on obviously a role as an internal medicine physician at UAMS, at the ambulatory clinic, or just in UAMS clinics. But you also took on, as soon as you came back, the role of a POM course director from the get-go. Was that a choice, or was that something that came as part of the job?
It's interesting that you asked that. So I applied in January for this job. I was told a couple of months later that I got the job. I came over in March and bought a house.
Okay.
In 5-6 days, luckily found a really nice house. And then in April, I got a call from UMS saying, so we're really glad that you're coming, but we really need you to be the course director of this second year course. And that's really a non-negotiable. And I was like, excuse me? I was just planning on teaching in the wards a little bit, having a medical student or two on the wards or in the clinic. I was like, I don't know how to do this.
Right.
They're like, well, you were chief resident at Brown, weren't you? And I was like,
right, but that's not...
No, I did run a course of 170 medical students.
Right.
And they said, don't worry. We have an EDD, a professional education person who's going to help you.
Right.
And she'll be your partner throughout this whole thing. What was I going to say? I had already bought a house. I was like, I'm moving to Little Rock.
Right.
I was like, okay, I'm just going to jump in. And I did it. I mean, so I was told in April. I started the job in July, August.
And then medical school students come in August.
So, but it was the best. I was originally obviously a lot stressed about it and feeling a little like, oh my God, I can't believe this just got dumped on me. But it was the best thing that happened to me in my life. Honestly, being the POM course director, it's the best thing that happened to me. Back then it was called Introduction to Clinical Medicine, ICM. And what I realized is, obviously, being a chief resident at Brown, I love teaching. That was my first taste of teaching.
Very gifted.
Loved it.
I can attest to that.
Thank
taught
you.
me.
Very kind. And so I just jumped in, and it very quickly became part of my identity. I fell in love with the students. I loved teaching. I had an expert for a year or two with me, more than 2 years, with me nonstop, specifically for me, to help me figure out what a syllabus is. How do you write objectives? What are objectives? How am I going to figure this out? And so I kind of had bumps along the way. And then I just fell in love with it. Fell in love with being students. This is my favorite part of my job.
That is amazing. Because I feel like that kickstarted your career as not just an academic physician, as an academic. Correct. You moved on from POM. I have it here. Hold on. So you moved on from teaching the POM course to being the Sim Center course director or the medical director. Then you were the assistant dean for undergraduate clinical education. Then you did you still taught POM. And then you became the master's communication group and faculty development. You ventured out, not just students. Now you're teaching and then you are now the associate dean of student affairs. So you're bilingual. academic affairs, student affairs. You're truly, literally bilingual too. So how do you do that? Because like it's not like you just apply on LinkedIn and get the job. Is that how it is?
No. Actually, neither of the jobs that I have held, Assistant Dean of Clinical Education or Associate Dean of Student Affairs, existed until I built it.
Yeah.
I built it. I realized that there wasn't anybody specifically looking at the third and fourth year in the clerkships. Mm-hmm. After being here for about 5 to 7 years, I thought, you know what? I think we need somebody looking at the third and fourth year clerkships, because I could remember back when I was a med student how much those clerkships meant to me.
Yes.
And so I asked the dean at that time. I put together a proposal and a plan, and I put together an argument for the dean that they needed an assistant dean of clinical education. Right. And I set a date. I met with her. I sent the proposal. She looked at it and she said, yeah.
No, that's that easy?
Yeah. She said, I asked for 50% time. She gave me 30. Fine. I took 30% time. And so that started that. And then I started learning more about the clinical medicine and clinical skills, because I'd always loved OSCEs. Because back then, POM was very OSCE heavy, as it still is, but we were doing a lot of stuff. Yes. And then I started getting more and more well-versed with the LCME and some of the evaluations in the third year and the learning environment and professionalism and all of those things. And then I realized most medical schools have an associate dean for student affairs.
Exactly.
We don't have one. We have at that time, 2 or 3 people doing the job with students. Yes. But not one person having a vision for student affairs. Yes. So I proposed that. The first time I asked, I got a no. They said, it's too early. Second time I asked, they're like, no, we're not in the situation where we can do that.
Too early. That's not a time for it. there's these quotas that need to be filled, and that quota's already been filled. And I know. Trust me. So I said, no, I'm not. So I didn't give up. I asked the third time, and the third time was a charm. And so the dean at the time said, yeah, I think this would be appropriate for you. And so you're not afraid to make it awkward, because it's difficult. It's difficult because these are your colleagues. You love them. You have worked with them for years.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to bring up a conversation like that.
It is hard. I'm not good at it. Trust me. I started off as a horrible negotiator, because they never teach you how to negotiate. No, and on top of that, what do they teach us in South Asian culture? Be humble.
Yes. Right? Just shut up and just do it. Do it. Follow your line, and that's it. You will make it big one day.
Thankful.
No, exactly. You don't, that's not, if everybody was to be thankful, I wouldn't be talking to you here. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. Right. None of us would be here.
That's right. Just be grateful and humble and thank God, and just be grateful that you're here in this country. And that humility is good. Yes. It has good qualities. Yes. But it makes us horrible negotiators.
Yeah, bad. Very bad. It's like Schrodinger's cat. We have to be dead and alive at the same time. Anywho.
Exactly.
So, look, I look up to you. And whenever I make a bad grade, I perform bad, I'm afraid to talk to you about this.
What?
Because, and let me, Philip, because I think I'm letting you down or you're not going to be proud. So I know that's illogical thinking. It's illogical thinking. But you mentioned one of your biggest mentors once when we were talking is Dr. Lee Archer, or any of your mentors. And at Brown too, you still keep in touch. Mm-hmm. Have you ever felt a little afraid talking about your shortcomings, or what can you do better, or like just you struggling to your mentors because of this feeling?
When I was a medical student, yeah, I won't lie, I did. I was embarrassed of my F, right?
Right.
And I guess because I didn't have people to talk to, or I didn't feel comfortable talking to people at that time, because in my mind, they were the giants of medicine, right? I guess that's why it's so important that students know that I'm not perfect. You know how in elementary school where you're shocked when you learn that your third grade teacher smokes and you're like,
I know.
Right? Or that they use the bathroom. Right? So I don't.
And you've done that.
And I've felt that way. And so I don't want my students to feel that way. And I think that's why the first day of med school, I just lay it all out there.
You do. And
I lay it all out there. Right? It's an open door policy where I feel like in medicine, we are a culture that is still overburdened by shame.
Yeah.
There's no room for mistakes, it feels like. There's no room for little failures. Yeah, you can't be human. You have to be perfect. You have to have the amount of research. You have to be the perfect clinician, the great student. You have to study. You have to...
Right.
Plus, you have to be the humanistic, compassionate. Right. Everything has to be the perfect package. Right. And we're not.
Right.
We fail. We mess up. We just got to get back up again. And so I think that's why I want every student to know, I was not AOA. My step scores were not spectacular.
Right.
My first grade was horrible. At that point, I remember going home to my dad with that F, and he said, but that's okay, just pass. It's okay, just pass. That was not good enough for me.
Right.
I wanted to do more than just pass.
Right.
Right.
So you are the first one in your family, first Indian American to go through this. So there's like extra
all
pressure.
The extra.
Right.
So I don't want students to feel what I felt growing up, because it's hard.
Yeah.
So that's why my first grade was an F, and that I would never be disappointed in you, because I know you always try. And all my students always try.
Yeah. That a lot, and everyone in medicine. We have, no matter who they are, no matter the worst of the worst, everybody tries.
Everybody tries.
Yeah.
In their own way. We all have our struggles. You have personal struggles. You have health struggles, financial struggles. Yeah. Everyone's here because you really, damn it, you want to be here.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, Now, you said in one of your interviews, well, actually one of your mentees said, Grant Cagle. Dr. Tariq asked me what I wanted in a program, and this is you talking about him wanting to go into internal medicine, and you were helping him apply. And this is part of the Houses program. You also created that, which is a phenomenal thing, by the way, because we have mentors right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. And it's like basically Harry Potter, which I see, I love it. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yes.
So, he said, Dr. Tariq asked me what I wanted in a program, what things are most important. She helped me understand myself as an applicant and shared her insights about the program. But you know what's more important? He said, she helped me find my balance. And that word is very important, balance. That's so you, Dr. Tariq. Because you have always shown us that balance is important, and it's not about becoming that dermatologist or that orthopedic surgeon or finding the glam and the glory. What are some of the times when a student came in your office, like me, that comes to mind that you really helped learn all these skills, or having all these conversations with the students, because you've honed your skills with so many students, so many teachers? What are some of your favorite moments with students that you having that conversation showed you that that taught me something, and then now I can use that skill to show other students too that the balance is important, failure is important, makes you who you are?
I think for me, one of the skills that I've had to hone in on, it's not natural, didn't come natural to me, was really deep listening. And so in situations where students have come to me,
it's hard,
right?
Mm-hmm.
When you listen deeply, things emerge
mm-hmm.
from people's hearts
mm-hmm.
that you can then pull out
mm-hmm.
and help provide a perspective or a reframe
mm-hmm.
of what the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, being able to do that, and I have to concentrate, that's not natural. I'm a talker, right? Look, right. I can talk forever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, shut up, Sara, and listen to the student, right? And when you listen, you will find students will reveal their shame, their hope, their fears. And oftentimes students are working so hard,
mm-hmm.
they're just looking to be seen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
You're just looking to be seen. That's the first thing that you said. You felt seen. And that's what students are looking for. They're not looking for the guru on the throne who's going to give them advice from on high.
No,
they're not. Everyone just wants to be seen. Yeah. Everyone wants a little bit of validation.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Everybody wants.
Yeah, I want a lot more. No, but I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Right? And so what other students don't realize is that I've learned so much from students. Students, I think that's what's the cool thing about teaching adults. You guys are almost fully formed humans, right? They say biologically your brain's not fully formed until the age of 26,
right.
But you're adults.
Right.
And so you come in with your own life experiences and your own perspectives and your own attitudes and behaviors and skills. Mm-hmm. And I learned from that too. And so everything that I put forth is an accumulation of so much of what my students have taught me, plus my own life experiences, right?
Right.
And I guess, from missing out on certain things, like not having people see me for who I am, right?
Right.
Not being made into a caricature of what people think I am,
right?
South Asian, Muslim,
mm-hmm.
young woman, mm-hmm. And so I work really hard to not do that to others. Yeah.
And you're very good at it. At least in my and my friends' opinion, because we talk about that, and that helps. That really helps, because one of my classmates, I asked him hey, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Tariq. What do you think? And he goes, talk about resilience. I've never seen someone with so much resilience and tenacity who never gives up. And for other people, giving up not for yourself is one thing, but not giving up for other students or other people is another thing. And that I also want to hit on that, because right now it's hard for me to do that. I'm fighting my own battle, trying to, I'm not gonna lie, like succeed. But
Yeah.
I also want to like help other people, but I can't. I don't have the resources. I don't have the gunpowder. I don't have the ammo. But you do that. How did you go from, like, because you have done education research. You have, I mean, like, I read a paper about, like what situations are good or conducive for learning. How can we reduce the stress? And you talked about pass fail, and you worked with Dr. John Spohn, Dr. Wook, all of these great, people from UAMS in doing that. How did you get from that? Because, for a while, you have to be self-driven to make it in medicine. But after a while, you have to make that switch, and it's not easy.
You're right. I think I would sort of characterize my path as points I've learned. I don't know where I learned this, but I've learned to identify when I have the bandwidth, when my bandwidth is wide and large.
Right.
And when I do that, I do more.
Right.
Right. And then there are times, like in the pandemic, when my bandwidth really shrank.
Right.
And so the painful decision at that point was to focus on myself and my family so I can expand my bandwidth again.
Right.
So that's number one. It's knowing when I can do things and when I can't. Because I heard remorse in your voice, Smith, when you said, I want to do all these things and I can't right now. And that's okay.
Right.
Because your job right now is to take care of yourself and learn.
Right.
Bandwidth will increase with time. Right now, your primary job is to be a student and study your butt off and learn and do as much as you can. So that's it. And then your bandwidth will expand. And then if there may be times in your life, hopefully it'll never be a pandemic, when you've got to shrink your bandwidth. Right. And that's okay too. So that's number one. Number two, I have a huge support system, right? I realize that I can't be everything at once.
No, you can't.
Hopefully my kids will say that I'm an amazing mom and they love me. And I think they will. But like I said, I didn't see my children say their first words, first steps. Didn't see any of that. But I felt comfortable that someone else who loved them deeply did see that, right? Whether it was the Gujarati auntie or my mom, right? There are people taking care of my kids who love them. And so I think I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with not being perfect at everything, but constantly trying to do my best. And so that's helpful. So a network of people who care for me and my family, but also understanding when my bandwidth has to close in. Okay. And that's okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Dang. All right. Last thing. I and a lot of my classmates, I did a poll. This is a class favorite question. So you gave us a lecture on eating disorders.
Yes.
Right? And one of the things you talked about was the female triad.
Yes. Female athletic triad.
Female athletic triad. And you said it would be on the test. Why was it not on the test?
Oh my God.
Why was it not on the test, Dr. Tariq?
I thought it was on the test.
Oh my God. We studied it. It's like, dude, Dr. Tariq.
Oh my God.
And then the last year's question was so easy. Why is that? You asked them, what eating disorder this? Anorexia or bulimia? You asked us, what labs do you look for? I was like, what? Come on, Dr. Tariq. Come on.
I'm so sorry.
ESR. Erythrocyte sedimentation rate. What? When did we talk about that? Oh my God. It's okay. I'm just kidding. That's
just
not
get it all out. No. It's okay.
My real question. My real question is, what is something that you want to talk about but you never get to because you do a lot of talks? You've always wanted to talk about, but you never really get to.
I think an area that I'm more and more interested in is, and I've started talking about, in the past 5 years, I've talked about some of this. But for me, I'm very interested in two things. I'm interested in talking, thinking, and learning more about compassion, because I feel that all of us go through compassion fatigue. And I feel like in this country, at least in the national discourse, I don't hear a lot of compassion. And I'm hearing about a lot of burnout among physicians, and I'm fortunate that I don't feel that burnout. And it may be because I get to hang out with you guys and you make me feel young and, you trick me into thinking that I'm younger than I am. So I want to really think a lot about compassion. In one of I think UCLA recently received a large grant to study compassion. The researchers, they're going to study compassion.
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. So I'm really interested in that. And the other thing I'm interested in, we've talked a lot about racism, It's sort of reared its ugly head in this country since before George Floyd's murder, but after that, the nation's discourse changed. And I'm really interested in how racism and healthcare, where they intersect, because we know that Black people in this country die younger. Their healthcare outcomes are poorer.
Yes.
And that's not out of the blue. That comes from a long list of racist policies that have been inculcated in our culture and our governments, local, state, and national, that have resulted in these outcomes in certain populations. And so I'm really interested in delving deeper and talking more about that and thinking about what we can do in med schools, in our healthcare system, in our clinics, in our OR, that can address and reverse some of those things. Because I think we're not immune to that.
No, we're not.
So those are two topics that I'm really interested in. And you heard me talk about it in Palm 1 this year, right? We talked about bias and how unconscious bias reveals itself, and how it has health outcomes. Bias results in people dying. It's serious, right? And so I'm sort of interested in those things that are a little bit harder to study.
Yeah, no, because it's like we spend so much time on facts, but we don't really spend time on things that are hard to teach because they're uncomfortable. And I mean, I don't blame anyone because they themselves might not have a good grasp on it. So how can I expect them to teach it to me? I get that.
Absolutely. So those are some of the topics that I'm interested in, that I haven't had time to delve too much into.
I'm sure we'll probably see the College of Medicine, Dr. Tariq, collaboration here in like a year or two. But okay, this is it. That's all I had. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate talking.
It is so much fun talking to you.
There you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you really loved and learned the amazing things Dr. Tariq stands for. Please stay tuned for future stories like these. And if you liked it, please drop a comment below and tell me what your favorite part was and what did you relate to the most.